right now.
I got
Cool.
you. Got
Thanks,
it.
David. Cool. So we got San Antonio in here, Rachel Haynes, got Bob Levinsky, San Marcos, Marianne Baker. Oh, cool. Region K Water Development Board Planning Committee. That's awesome. Representative League of Voters, Women Voters. Cool. Hi, Craig. Got Alexander and Caldwell. Awesome. Hi, Teresa. Cool. So I'm gonna get started. Like I said, my name is Jason, and today's the August meeting for Water for the People Environment Committee. So if you're new here, the Water for People Environment Committee is a volunteer-led effort to educate and empower Texans to become stronger advocates for water in their communities. We host monthly meetings on various water issues impacting our state. You know, there's all sorts of water issues, right? We've got reservoirs and popping up in certain spots. There's produced water. There's floods and disasters, and you know how we handle those, like response and prevention. Lots of water issues, right? So you know, we try to cover as much as we can here. Last month we covered the water energy nexus. So, you know, it takes water to make energy, and it takes water or energy to make water. And today's meeting is kind of like a perfect continuation of that. So if you'd like to connect with fellow Texans concerned about water, you're at the right place. We invite you to sign up. The link is in the chat. And if you'd like to learn more about our committee, please feel free to reach out to the Sierra Club's water program coordinator, Evgenia Spears. Her email is on this slide. Normally she hosts these meetings. This is Dexter's. Everyone say hi to Dexter. But she's in, I think, Midland today with Dan. He's one of our regional volunteer leaders. And they're at a consortium for produced water. If you don't know, produced water is basically the byproduct of oil and gas extraction. It has a ton of gnarly stuff in it, but they're trying to figure out how to clean it up and make it useful, which is good because oil and gas extraction uses a lot of water, but it's also really tough because there's a lot of stuff in that. It's kind of nasty. So our next meeting is in September on the 8th. We meet on the second Monday of each month from 6:30 to 7:30. The next meeting is on coastal groundwater flooding by Dr. Dorina Mergulet. She's a scientist here, and groundwater is a very deep issue, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So I'm excited for next month's meeting. Meeting for October, the presentation, the topic is to be determined. So stay tuned for that. Let's see. Cool. And that catches us up. So Evgenia usually gives an update on legislative happenings. There's a special session right now, and there's a lot of work being done on response and prevention for floods and disasters. But she's in Midland and the internet's kind of choppy for her right now. So she's going to post an update on Instagram. So keep an eye out for that over the next week or two, hopefully, probably within the next week, once she gets some solid internet. So I'm going to do the update, H2O highlight update for the Coastal Bend. If you don't know, there's a desalination plant that has been in the works for about 10 years. And there was some significant development around that recently. The city council recently voted to pause funding for the development of that project. It's been kind of a hot topic around here because they're proposing to discharge the concentrated brine into our bay system. And the modeling for that really hasn't been thorough up until recently. And what recent modeling has been done has not really been shared with the public. They've shown a couple results, but really not much. For me, I'm concerned about the impacts to Nueces Bay, which is there's a connection to it located close to the outfall of this plant. And that's a really important bay for us. So I'm hoping we can kind of figure that out. But like I was saying, the city council recently voted to pause funding for it because recently the cost had gone up from $750 million for the project to $1.2 billion. So a 50% increase, which is a lot because desalination is already really expensive. So they'll probably have a vote on that within the next week or two, and then we'll update you on that sometime within the next month. But yeah, that's kind of like the main gist of it. Right now, the design is at 10%, and they're trying to figure out whether or not they want to spend $50 million to take the design to 60%. And at that point, the developer is going to create a guaranteed maximum price for the project. Could be higher, could be lower. But we're still kind of trying to figure out what is the best solution for us. And yeah, so we'll find out within the next month or two. Okay, so on to the main event. We have Dr. Erin Kinney with us tonight to unpack a very complex issue, the impacts of AI data centers on our water resources. Thank you for being with us tonight, Erin. I'll let you introduce yourself, and we're looking forward to your presentation. The floor is yours. I think I need to stop screen sharing and hand it over to you.
Yes, please. Thank
I
you.
totally don't know how to do, so hopefully I figure it out right
You
away.
did it. Bravo, and thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
See if this can fit.
Awesome.
All right. Excellent. Hopefully you are seeing the actual presentation and not some working version of it. All right, perfect. Thank you, Dave. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining all of us tonight. My name is Erin Kinney. I'm a senior research scientist at HARC. And my work has focused on anthropogenic, that is human-induced impacts on coastal systems. And lately, that conversation has shifted to include the water energy nexus, which my colleague, Dr. Margaret Cook, presented on, and water and equity. So I'm excited to share some of the latest work HARC has been doing on the impacts and potential future impacts of data centers and AI on water in Texas, and some of what we've learned so far. Okay. For those of you who aren't familiar with HARC, we are the Houston Advanced Research Center. We are a nonprofit organization, and we apply science to drive energy, air, water, and resilience solutions for a sustainable and equitable future. So we're a group of scientists and engineers, policy folks, and community engagement folks who work with communities and local governments and every stakeholder in between to try and come up with solutions to the issues that we're all facing. So data centers in general are physical facilities that house computing infrastructure, including servers, storage devices, and computational and networking equipment to store and manage digital operations and data. These can include cryptocurrency. The more common one that this presentation is really focusing on are AI data centers. And a data center's energy and water needs can be quite substantial. A large hyperscale data center can consume the same energy as about 80,000 US households. And that number is actually going up. The Washington Post recently, or not too long ago, published an article where they said that a 100-word email generated by AI using ChatGPT-3 used 3 tablespoons of water. That same 100-word email using GPT-4 is now more than 1 bottle of water. So if you can imagine how many people are just casually having AI write them an email, plus the folks who are using it for serious computing and to really magnify their research capabilities, that's a lot of water per person. And that's a lot of water per activity. So this is, I really liked putting it on that kind of personal scale because the numbers I'm going to be talking about are so large that there are only a handful of us who can kind of think in those quantities. But yeah, one email is more than a bottle of water. Okay, there we go. So in Texas, we are really still struggling to get a handle on exactly how many data centers we have and exactly how many we're going to have. As of April 2025, Texas had about 407 facilities. That's according to Baxtel. There is no statewide database of AI or data centers. So we're relying on folks who have the capacity to get that information. According to their analysis, which we're fairly confident in, there were 190 in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. They're the third largest market in the US, just Dallas-Fort Worth. And then you add in 39 in Houston, 54 in San Antonio, 47 in Austin, 49 in West Texas, plus 74 more that were under construction or in planning and development. And that's quite a bit in the state of Texas and growing. And so this is not a problem that we think we can afford to wait and see what's going to happen because it's already happening faster than I think a lot of folks are able to keep up with. So this is an interesting graphic put out by NREL. These are the data center infrastructure networks across the United States. So the yellow and the red and the orange are transmission lines of different voltage. So really just if it's colored, it's transmission line, and the white are the fiber optic networks. And so the data centers are represented by circles, and the size of the circle is the demand capacity. And so if you look at Texas, we have more webbing than a lot of places with the exception of maybe, some of the states in the Eastern Seaboard. So we are kind of prime real estate for the development of these AI centers. And so when it comes to siting decisions, these two networks is really key, but so are things like land lease availability and price, the price of power, proximity to fiber, which is included in this, but other factors like floodplain, other building considerations, ability to source water if they have high water needs, and we'll go into that in much more detail in a moment. In addition to the proximity to a labor force and the distance from residential and other permitting considerations. And these things can kind of fight against each other. There have been a lot of stories recently about these data centers being very close to residential areas and the negative impacts on those communities. But at the same time, they don't want to place them so far out that they're unable to recruit workers to those areas, or it's more expensive for them to build them. So I think a lot of these AI centers are trying to avoid permitting restrictions. And it's really, I think, going to be essential for a lot of folks, and I'll talk about this towards the end of the presentation, to consider how these are regulated and who has the information that they need in order to make these decisions. So one organization that is fairly forward-thinking with the growth of data centers is ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. They have a 5-year projection forecast of load broken down by type. And so on this graphic, the dark blue is just kind of their base load without PV, which is photovoltaic solar. And then the light blue that grows so quickly over each of those 5 years, that is energy demand from data centers. Not included in data centers are crypto, so they have their own slightly darker blue line, industrial uses, which is an even lighter blue, hydrogen, oil and gas, and photovoltaic. So data centers alone really are expected to increase tenfold by 2030. And if they're running full steam ahead, so about 24/7, data center demand would occupy 75% of the total currently available electric generation capacity that we have right now. In addition to those high energy needs are their water needs. So data centers historically have had very high water needs for cooling. And that's divided really into two buckets. The first is direct water use at the data centers, and the second is indirect use at the power plants that are generating the energy who have their own cooling demands. So even if a data center is not using water, that much water on site, they might be pulling down more energy, and where are they getting that energy from, and what's the water demand of that energy as well. So a lot of things to consider when we're looking at potential impacts. So at HARC, we really started to dig into, can we estimate the water demands from data centers kind of at a state level? And there have been some studies that have looked at demand for specific data centers that have been published, and so we're relying on those data. And the estimated water demand for cooling of a data center is about 476 gallons per megawatt hour of energy use at a data center. And these data centers can really vary in size, so it needs to be considered on a per megawatt hour size. Direct data center consumption is largely evaporation through a chiller or a cooling tower, which means that new withdrawals would occur to replace that vaporized water with fresh water. So the hotter it is, the more evaporation. Texas is not a cool state. There are reasons why this is especially a problem for Texas. In addition, so there's wastewater from the data centers. This is largely blowdown, so it's water removed from the cooling supply to prevent excessive concentration of dissolved solids. Usually it's just that as you reuse the water, it becomes briny over time and you need to switch it out. In addition, there's also as I mentioned earlier, the indirect water use at power plants for cooling. And so the source of power for these data centers is something else that needs to be considered. So when you're looking at water use at a particular data center facility, there are a number of influences that could impact that. The amount of water that a particular site is going to use is dependent upon, first and foremost, the cooling type that they use there. And I'll be going over those in just a moment. And in addition to that, there's the size of the data center, the type of data center, whether it's a hyperscaler or crypto, AI, how long they're running, what times of day, is it burst, is it continuous, those kinds of questions, as well as the type of equipment that needs cooling, and then how many times the water is cycled and any wastewater that is produced. And so all of those factors, in addition to the cooling type, of which there are these four here on the right side of the screen. The first is a cold plate cooling, which I have examples of all of these. I'll go through them in just a second. And that basically means they're going to cool the hottest components. There's one phase cooling where they used an oil-based liquid to surround the servers instead of water. A two-phased cooling, which is another chemical liquid, and then dry cooling, which is basically using air conditioning to air cool these facilities. So that one phase immersion cooling, this is a great graphic that CRSI put together. So the servers are totally submerged in a cooling bath, and it's a hydrocarbon-based dielectric liquid. The heat is produced and then transferred to the coolant through the direct contact with the components, but the water does not cycle through. So the water is in its own self-contained loop, and it is cycled to cool off that other liquid so that you're not getting contamination from the servers themselves. In a two-phase immersion cooling, I'm sorry, I'm just going to go back for 1 second. So this one is actually much more energy efficient because that liquid has a much higher heat capacity than air or water. So that's one of the reasons why this kind of one-phase immersion chemical cooling is popular with some of these facilities. A two-phase immersion cooling, this is actually the most efficient cooling method. And it can also reduce a lot of the wear and tear on the servers themselves. In this version, systems are sealed into a tank that's filled with a fluorocarbon-based liquid, and the liquid has a low boiling point. So the heat generated by the components makes it boil. The boiling liquid is really the core of that two-phase system, and that phase change is really what's causing the cooling. And then the water chilling unit is again a self-contained loop where cold water is filtered in and then pumped back out and chilled elsewhere. So this is where you're going to see that. This particular setup improves the hardware lifespan by 20%. It reduces the replacing costs. It has a 39% reduction of carbon emissions, a 91% reduction of water consumption, and a reduction of noise pollution. So there's a lot of pros to this, but there are some significant cons. The fluorocarbon-based liquid is very expensive, and you need specialized training for folks to be able to handle it. Because if you have to go in and fix anything in your server, you have to go into this tank, drain the tank, get to the server, fix what you need to fix, and then replace all of that. So it is, as I said, the most efficient cooling, but it's not necessarily the most efficient when it comes to water use. This one is called direct or cold plate cooling. And in this version, the water actually goes directly over the most high power consuming components. So processors, graphics cards, those kinds of things. This is often offered as like a retrofit from air cooling. So it's like a step away from with the traditional air cooling. And so there is a chance that this water could pick up contaminants as it passes over those components and is recycled. It's just something to be aware of. And really, this is where it comes down to how is this place run? What are the potential contaminants in their system, and how transparent are they being about their wastewater? And as I said, this is the water potential, the primary potential water consumption is that chilled water loop, the evaporative cooling tower. Okay. And now this is the traditional air cooling or dry cooling. And so this has evolved to be slightly more energy efficient in that there's now kind of an opposite flow. So there's a hot aisle and a cold aisle. This can be done at the server level, or it can be cooled at the rack level. This is actually the most water saving option, but it uses the most electricity. So this is one where it becomes important to think about where that electricity is coming from and how much water is being used for this. Interestingly, this is how things used to be done. And so it's something to consider when they start talking about which one is the most environmentally friendly. What do they mean by that? So dry cooling at both power plants and data centers is possible, and it would make those centers close to zero water use. They could supplement with general net zero strategies for other on-site water, using rainwater harvesting, gray water reuse, those kinds of strategies. There is an energy penalty associated with dry cooling that means that more power supply would be needed, but this strategy is already in operation at one facility in Austin, for example. Also, low or no water use power technologies can be used along with this. So you could be looking at wind and solar and natural gas turbines. And then some municipal water reuse can be used in those instances as well. So there's an Austin power plant, Sand Hill, that's already using municipal reuse for its cooling. So it is possible to make those dry cooling data centers much more water efficient as long as the energy component is considered. So Hark went back and we really started to look at what these estimated water demands look like for the state of Texas. So in 2025, the estimated total consumption is around 34 billion gallons of water per year for direct cooling, and an additional 15 billion gallons at power plants, what would be known as an indirect water use. So that's less than 1%, it's 0.8% of the 2020 estimated annual water demand that's in the 2022 State Water Plan. That's at a state level. When you look at a local demand and a local level, those are very large impacts. So I think that these numbers for a community who's considering one or more data centers feel very misleading. However, by 2030, when when we look at that projection that ERCOT is estimating of a tenfold increase, data centers could account for almost 6% of the 2030 estimated annual water demand in that same state water plan. And that's 50% of the 804 billion gallons demand for steam, electric, and manufacturing sectors. So that's a significant factor now at a statewide level, in addition to those acute local impacts from where is the water coming from, where is the energy coming from, and how are all of these things connected to the communities nearby. So it is true that the water is frequently recirculated. How many times is recirculated varies from data center to data center. But really the takeaway from this is that the impacts are going to be so much greater at that local scale, and local folks really need to be aware of what's going on and which questions to ask. So the challenge of estimating these water demands of data centers really comes down to data uncertainty. There's a lack of transparency from data centers. It was not easy to find studies that had been done and published on this, and it's even harder to find information from data centers that are being developed. We were basing our calculations on those ERCOT estimates and a nationwide study. Unfortunately, data center water demand growth is not included in the state water plan in manufacturing or steam electric estimates. In neither the 2022 state water plan nor the 2026 regional water plans. This is because when the 2022 one I've been told, was when it was being written, they were not permitted, and if they were not permitted, they could not be included. But that also means that even when things are planned, they can't get written into the next water plan because they haven't been permitted yet. So the planning mechanism, the rules around that, I think are really hampering the ability of especially municipalities and local entities to make decisions, informed decisions about their water needs when these data centers are a factor. Municipalities just don't have the most up-to-date data to make informed choices, and there's a risk of borrowing against future water needs, hoping that there will be a solution at some point. And so we're really hoping that by getting the little data that are available out there, but really informing folks that this is really very poorly understood, and it varies so widely from data center to data center that folks need to be asking the right questions. So there are strategies available for reducing water demands. I talked about how with dry cooling, you can couple that with water lean energy technologies like solar, wind, and natural gas turbines. You can also use alternative water sources like municipal reuse or on-site gray water. There's been some talk of whether or not these data centers can use produced water for some of this work. I think that's going to come up with a whole host of black boxes and what's really in this water questions. But the other factor that I mentioned briefly was scheduling, and I don't think that that's really well documented as to how often these are running and what hours and those kinds of things. Ultimately, I think it's going to come down to the need for public-private partnerships. That folks are going to need to work together to really make sure that communities are not bearing the brunt of this new technology. In addition, we really need some better policies around data centers and how all of these decisions are being made. Incentives for water lean strategies could really go a long way. Water saving ordinances in various jurisdictions could help. We really feel that they should be looking to the energy sector regarding large demands, things like fees and how many studies are required. Ultimately, I think that a one water framing would be beneficial for any municipality or entity that's considering the impact of a data center on their stakeholders. One Water would consider everything from where's the water coming from to where's it going to who are the other users to what are the natural uses. Is green infrastructure involved in this? Is water reuse involved in this? What kind of decisions are being made, and can they be made more holistically so that the benefits outweigh the costs to all those who are involved. So without proactive planning and an integrated policy framework for data centers, their unchecked expansion could really strain Texas's infrastructure and jeopardize progress towards reliable, sustainable, and resilient energy and water systems. All of this early analysis was done ad hoc with data that are publicly available. We're currently looking for funding to be able to gather our own data on data centers, specifically in Texas, and how they are likely to impact specific communities and water sources in the state. Because as I said, the local impacts are really going to, I think, far overshadow what we're seeing at a statewide level. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Kinney. That was great. Let's see. Does anyone have any questions? I found a few in the chat. One was from John T, Steve, Janet. Does anybody want to come on?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions if this is a good moment. Okay,
Yeah,
one
go for
is you looked at the Bextel estimate. Were all those giant data centers, or were those data centers of all sizes?
Those are data centers of all sizes.
Okay, and the other question I had was, have you looked at projections for future computer technologies that use less energy and therefore would need less cooling? It seems to me I've seen articles, at least headlines, saying that such things are in the works, but I don't know the state of that.
I don't either, and I don't know the limiting factors on that. So very often what I see with technology is like, oh, we made it cheaper or we made it more energy efficient. And so what they do is they just add more capacity so that they're spending the same amount of money, but they have more power. Now, if they're limited by the transmission lines or by, the grid or something else, then it could actually be a check on, say, the water demands or the energy demand. I'm not familiar enough with how quickly those technologies are advancing to know really what's a limiting factor at this point. And I'd love to look into it more. We're still trying to find someone who's willing to help pay us researchers to do the work.
Sure, yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
My question, but first just know that I am far from expert on these matters, and it probably showed in my question, but I guess I just am getting at, are there ways that some of these, I'm assuming these are pretty huge corporations, most of them, can they be required to produce some amount of their own energy? And again, I don't really know exactly how that would happen. Those are really technical drawings, even though Aaron, you did a great job trying to describe stuff, but I just don't have that kind of quantitative brain. But I certainly am worried living in Texas for the number of years that I have been here, and just seeing water supplies become more and more at risk. We have a governor who suggested we move water from Texas to from Houston to West Texas. I mean, there's just all kinds of craziness going on. So that was kind of the first question. But the other question I had was when you said we would have to be very proactive in making sure that companies are trying to be decent stewards of water use. And I'm thinking, in Texas, who regulates that? who would be in charge of making that happen if it could even happen. Sorry about my cynicism. It's real.
I share it. I think that in reality, that push for control is going to have to come from residents. That's going to have to come from people making noise and saying, no, this isn't okay. What's this going to do to our water bill? What's this going to do to the fact that you told us we couldn't water at all last summer, or, you know, we had to close the municipal swimming pool, or whatever it may be. You know, things like, if I'm being asked to only water once a month or once a week, are these folks being asked to limit their water supply? And how many jobs are they really going to create? That's the other question. I mean, are there 3,000 people in these facilities, or is it one person just walking around checking stuff and that's it? And so I think that there are a lot of issues that are getting a soundbite that isn't necessarily representative. I apologize. I was writing down your questions, but the first question, can you summarize it quickly? What your first question was?
I just wanted to know if there was any real way that these data centers could begin to power themselves to some degree.
Yes. So some of them are moving here, and they're not even waiting for, you know, to figure out if the grid can handle them. They're putting up a generator. And so the question is, who's permitting that generator? Should they be doing this with solar or with wind or with some other methodology? Is it a diesel you know, I just don't know. It depends on the size of the facility. So I think that, again, I don't know how quickly the policy is going to move, Texas being Texas. But I think that at a local level, if you can find out, okay, who's giving them a permit for something? Is it a local groundwater, or is it a groundwater district? Is it a city? Is it a county? Is it none of the above? And, you know, putting pressure on them and make sure that they're answering the right questions and that they're accountable for what the answers are. That would be my suggestion at this point.
Thank you, Aaron. Y'all chime in briefly. Dave Cortez with the Sierra Club. Aaron, if you don't mind stopping share, then everybody will be able to see each other a little bit easier.
I thought I had done that. Apologies.
You're all good, Janet. So first and foremost, I think we've all learned, you know, living in Texas my whole life, you all living for a long time, we can't count on Texas politicians to do the right thing. Never. So all we can count on is our ability to talk to our neighbors, our coworkers, our friends, our family, and our, you know, churchgoers about what's going on and how we're getting the short end of the stick. And certain folks, typically well-moneyed corporations, tend to get the benefit. That's what's so impressive and valuable for me about the story that Jason's sharing in Corpus Christi, how the community, a marginalized community, is rising up against some of the most powerful interests in the state and the country and in the world, honestly, against selling off their water for corporate greed and polluting needs, as they say it, and trying to resist that. And so we have to think about how we do that as much as possible, not just trying to pass laws, but talking to our peers. And we have to be mindful. In Hays County and other places, this local generation is gas plants. It's you know, combined cycle gas generation on site to power these data centers, only worsening the climate crisis, only fueling the water fights. And so we have to fight on every local fight we can. Let me pass it back to Jason for the next question.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Janet. All right, so we have Brian with his hand raised. If you want to come off mute, and then after Brian is Michael.
Hey, Brian Zopchik. I'm the advocacy director at Save Barton Creek Association in Austin. We work on streams and aquifers throughout Central Texas. Aaron, your use of the word jurisdictions kind of triggered my question. We have seen for developments of all types a real move to place them in unincorporated city areas in order to escape the higher regulations that take place within city limits. And I was wondering if you had any data, and if not any data, kind of like any sense of for the data centers, for the 407 data centers that you've been talking about, how many might be within city limits and how many are in unincorporated county areas? Thanks.
That's a very good question. We're seeing exactly the same thing. And so I think what's making us, it's basically just forcing us to dig a little bit deeper. Okay, so they're outside of city limits, but what water supply are they tapping into? Who shares that water supply? And, you know, when the next drought comes, who gets their share first? And so I think that's going to be one of the only ways to really get around this is, okay, so they're in an unincorporated area. What's their proximity to this area in terms of who's going to get their power first? Who's going, you know, water, power. These are, you know, the things that have been driving humanity for thousands of years. So yeah, that's just it. They are being savvy about the lack of regulations in Texas, and so they're choosing places where there aren't as many rules. And so figuring out how to raise awareness about that is one of our challenges, I think.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Michael, did you still want to come off mute and ask your question?
Sure. Do you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So I live in Henderson County, which is East Texas, and I'm a city councilman, and I usually go to the county commissioners meeting every Tuesday. And so recently I have a good relationship with their subdevelopment or development director, and so she brought to my attention that there was a 1,200 acre piece of land, this agricultural land that has been requested for permitting for numerous data centers. Now, this property is located adjacent. I mean, it's less than a half a mile from the western edge of Cedar Creek Lake, and then it's about a mile or less from the Trinity River. It's a large tract of land, but it's close to two major water resources. Everything on this part of Henderson County utilizes water from the Cedar Creek Lake, as well as it's owned by Tarrant Water Management District, which is the water supply for this, one of the many lakes, water supply for the city of Fort Worth. So this was this is my first time I've been on this this venue, and I thank you, Aaron. Your presentation was fantastic, and it brought some information that I can then work with the county. But really, what I want to say is that this is happening all over Texas, an undeveloped thing. If it's not data centers, it's Bitcoin, or it's I'm all about renewables, but it's developing large solar farms and everything, trying to tie into the grid and sustainability and everything. But these are all issues that are affecting people that are living in rural parts of Texas, and so we need to address that and be more aware. And so all of you that are on here, get a little more involved with your county commissioners, because people are coming in asking for permits, and they don't really release that until they've done their review and everything, and then they have to go for public hearings. And that's when really all of us get to know and understand what's going on. And understand is in quotes. So anyway, thank you all. It was a great presentation.
Thank you for that.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. I think Emily has their hand raised. Do you want to come off mute?
Hi. Yeah. Thanks for the presentation. I'm gonna probably rewatch it to try to understand more about the different types of cooling. I have a couple clarifying questions about the indirect water use, which somewhat contradicted what I thought I understood. So I just want to make sure I have the right understanding. I thought I saw natural gas as one of the water lean energy sources, but I thought that, well, and maybe this is old data, but from a Department of Energy study I've read, combined, what is it? Natural gas combined cycle plants use 370 gallons per megawatt hour, I'm not, well, I'm mostly asking if you can point me into like more current or better sources about, I was in contact a bit with folks from the Weber Energy Group at UT about Watergy Energy Nexus stuff, and they sent me some articles, but they were like kind of over my head, frankly. And then the other thing was that the breakdown of water use for direct cooling versus indirect. Maybe I didn't take, my notes aren't right, but I thought that indirect water use was generally a lot more than direct water use. And I was wondering how you got those numbers, basically.
So for data centers, it's direct water use is actually usually projected to be much higher. And that is because of the cooling problem, because of the sheer volume of water that they need to pump through their system, whether that's to run their AC or to run these other cooling methodologies just to cool off their equipment. And so they are the indirect, which is the power generation, is typically thought to be lower because that's water use at scale, and there are a lot of other factors into that as well. And also that's typically statewide, that incorporates other energy generation sources. To go back to your question about the natural gas turbines, that surprised me too. I got that from Margaret, who used to be part of the Weber Energy Group, so she's probably got it from those articles that are definitely written for engineers by engineers. But I can ask follow up, and if you want to email me directly, I will drop my email in the chat right now. I can help you get some more of that information.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. I think we have time for a few more questions. First up, we got Craig and then Bobby.
Okay, this is actually a comment about what's going on with data centers and everything. There was a bill this spring in the legislature was grants to data centers and crypto mining to develop small nuclear power plants that could be used on site, so they really didn't have to plug into the grid. And we were able to, with a lot of help from organizations, to don't make it grants, because they would just give the money and they wouldn't have to prove anything for it. But this is an ongoing issue. That's a very important, I think, aspect of this issue, using local power so they don't have to tax the grid. Well, what are they going to do that? So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I don't have the numbers on the water demand on a small scale nuclear plant.
Thanks, Craig. Bobby, are you still there?
Yep. So one of the issues that we keep coming back to with the San Marcos community, since we're so susceptible to drought, is how the prioritization is done with drought management plans. And I still have not come to an answer or found any information on how you can actually curtail the usage of these facilities that require constant cooling. Has there been any communities that have been effectively put forward drought management plans or anything like that that could curtail usage without destroying these facilities?
Not that I'm aware of, because they're not allowed to put them in the plan. I don't know who wrote that rule, but I was shocked when I learned that. Yeah, I don't know if it's in any actual drought management plans. I don't know if it's included in resilience plans, which probably are not as universally accepted across the state. So yeah, that's an excellent question, but I'm not aware of them being worked in.
Could they theoretically be reduced? I mean, just kind of without killing the facility?
I think it comes down to what their current technology is and how it's set up. So could they reduce capacity in order to reduce their water load and still be running at a kind of baseline? Could they change once they get running and start making money, could they upgrade to something that's more water saving? Like, create the capacity to generate solar on their roof in order to provide the electricity they need and go to the air cooled. I don't really know. And I think that's going to be down to the finer points of rules and regulations and how that contract is and state grants and funding and loans and all of those incentive stuff that they bake into some of these deals.
Awesome. Thanks, Bobby. Yeah. So does San Marcos have like a drought management plan? And do they mention like large volume users? I know in Corpus we have one. We let them pay 25 cents 1,000 gallons to use as much as they want. But before that, they were given an allocation, like 80% of normal use once a certain stage of the drought was reached, like stage 3 or stage 4. So that may be something to look into.
I think one of the other issues we're dealing with is multiple utilities as well that don't have as good of drought management plans.
Yeah, I would look at whoever the regional water supplier is, because whoever they wholesale to, like the smaller communities, they're supposed to kind of like mirror whatever the wholesaler's drought management plan is. That way it's kind of like effective throughout the whole region. Cool. We have time for one more question if anyone has a quick one. I know there's probably a few in the chat. I haven't really been keeping track. But Dr. Kinney put her email in the chat. Thank you for doing that. And you can email Evgenia if you have any questions afterwards. We're gonna send out the meeting probably within the next week. And here's the contacts for all the local leaders that are part of the committee. So for example, I'm one of the volunteer leaders for the Coastal Bend. Peyton's the other one. And thank you all for coming out. Please sign up if you aren't signed up for the meetings. And our next one is on September 8th, I think. Anyways, thanks for coming out, y'all.
Thank y'all so
Great,
much.
Jason.
Those were great
Thank
questions.
you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Y'all have a good one.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Cool. I got the date right. I was worried about that.
You got it. You got it. All right. Thanks, everybody.